The spring air was warm and sweet, carrying the scent of fresh flowers and the distant laughter of children playing outside, though tonight, inside the old high school gymnasium of Charleston, the sound was replaced by excited chatter and the clinking of glasses as former classmates reunited for the 10-year reunion. Emily Johnson paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, feeling a mixture of excitement and unease. She had not set foot in her hometown in years, not since life had taken her on paths she could never have imagined in high school, paths full of both joy and pain. Her hair was neatly styled, her blue dress fitting perfectly, simple yet elegant, and her heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she stepped inside, trying to blend into the crowd while still feeling like she stood out. Familiar faces turned her way, old friends who had changed with time, teachers who had aged gracefully, and even a few classmates she barely remembered, yet they all greeted her with polite smiles and nods, some offering hugs and gentle questions about her life. She smiled, feeling a flicker of warmth, but her attention was quickly drawn to a shadow from the past, someone whose presence made her heart tighten in a way she hated to admit. Mark Wilson, her ex-husband, stood near the refreshments, holding a glass of wine and speaking with a small group, but his eyes found her immediately. His smile was not kind, not friendly, but mocking, the kind that carried old judgments and unhealed resentment. Well, if it isn't Emily Johnson," he said, his voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. "Still single, I see, or is this another one of your failed attempts at love?" The words were sharp, designed to sting, and Emily felt the heat rush to her cheeks as a familiar ache of embarrassment threatened to rise. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, reminding herself that she no longer needed his approval or validation, that her life had moved far beyond the narrow world he seemed to inhabit. "Hello, Mark," she said quietly but firmly, holding her head high. "It's been a long time." She tried to keep her voice calm, controlled, but she could feel the eyes of a few others lingering, sensing the tension between them. Mark laughed, a low, unpleasant sound that made Emily shiver slightly. "Yeah, a long time for you to figure out life, apparently," he said, leaning slightly closer as if to emphasize his words. "Guess some people never change." Emily felt a tight knot in her stomach, an old familiar feeling from years ago, the sense that no matter how far she ran, some shadows would always chase her. Her friends, noticing the shift in her expression, moved closer, subtle but supportive, their presence a small shield against the sting of his words. She clenched her hands inside her clutch, reminding herself to stay strong, to not give him the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. But before the tension could grow any further, the gym doors swung open with a quiet sweep, and a new presence entered the room. Heads turned, conversations paused for just a moment, and even Mark's smirk faltered as he noticed the newcomer. Daniel Carter, tall and composed, stepped inside wearing a dark, perfectly tailored suit that hinted at both wealth and confidence, his shoes tapping lightly against the floor. His eyes scanned the room until they found Emily, and in that instant, she felt a wave of relief wash over her, a warmth that melted the sting of Mark's words almost entirely. Daniel's smile was gentle and reassuring, the kind of smile that spoke of understanding, support, and a love that had carried her through some of the darkest days of her life. Emily's heart lifted. She had built a life that was strong, independent, and beautiful, a life far beyond the reach of Mark's small-minded judgments. She had chosen happiness, and Daniel was proof that she had done so wisely. The room seemed to shift subtly as Daniel walked toward her, his presence commanding attention without arrogance, drawing the eyes of many alumni who whispered softly to one another, clearly intrigued by the couple. Emily's friends noticed the change in her demeanor, the way her posture straightened, her smile returning fuller and brighter than before, and they knew she had found a strength that came from being genuinely cherished. Mark, on the other hand, could feel the room closing in on him in a social sense, a realization dawning that his petty attempts to shame Emily were now powerless against the reality of her life. Daniel reached Emily, his hand gently brushing hers in a soft, private greeting, a gesture that carried both protection and love. Emily felt her heart calm, the nervous energy of the reunion replaced by the steady comfort of knowing she was no longer alone, that her choices had brought her to a life filled with support, trust, and joy. Around them, the chatter resumed, but for Emily, the world had narrowed to the space she shared with Daniel, a space where the echoes of past humiliation could no longer reach her. She felt proud, not from arrogance, but from the quiet knowledge that she had survived, grown, and flourished. Mark tried to speak again, a faint attempt at a snide remark, but his words faltered as he saw the way Emily's gaze met Daniel's steady, unwavering, full of calm confidence, and he realized that the power he once thought he had over her was gone, replaced by the undeniable reality that Emily was no longer a person to be belittled or dismissed. She had transformed, quietly but completely, into someone radiant, grounded, and untouchable by old insecurities. The reunion continued around them, filled with laughter, music, and shared memories, but Emily's focus was clear. She had survived her past, she had chosen a life of meaning, and she had found love that was genuine and profound. As the evening stretched on, she found herself reconnecting with old friends, telling stories that made people laugh, and sharing moments of warmth and nostalgia, all while feeling the quiet strength of Daniel beside her, a constant reminder that she was valued, protected, and loved. Every glance she received from him, every reassuring squeeze of her hand, reinforced that she was finally free from the shadows of judgment and the sting of old hurt. And though Mark lingered awkwardly at the edge of her vision, attempting to assert a presence that had long since faded, Emily knew she had no need to acknowledge him further. She had stepped into a life of her own making, a life that was rich not just in wealth, but in respect, happiness, and the deep, steady love that had always eluded her in her youth. The lights in the gym reflected softly off the polished floor, casting a warm glow over the scene, a reminder that life could be beautiful, even when it carried old pain, and that strength came not from holding grudges or lashing out, but from rising above, embracing joy, and standing tall in the face of the past. As Emily looked around, she saw friends laughing, couples dancing, and memories being shared freely, yet she felt a serene separation, a quiet pride in knowing that she had walked through fire and emerged unscathed. The evening was just beginning, and with Daniel by her side, Emily felt ready to face anything, confident that no shadow from her past could dim the light she had found within herself and in the life she had chosen. In that moment, standing amidst the laughter, music, and soft glow of the reunion, Emily Johnson realized something profound: she was no longer the person Mark had known in high school. She was stronger, wiser, and far happier, and the love she shared with Daniel was proof that life, in all its complexity, could be kind to those who dared to persevere, forgive, and embrace their true worth. The reunion was now in full swing, the gym filled with the hum of conversation, soft laughter, and the occasional clink of glasses, yet for Emily Johnson, the world had narrowed to a delicate balance between excitement and the lingering tension of the past. She moved through the crowd with Daniel Carter beside her, his presence a steadying force that reminded her of how far she had come, yet she could not entirely ignore the sharp gaze of Mark Wilson, who seemed determined to reassert himself despite the quiet power Emily now carried. As she mingled, greeting former classmates with warmth and genuine interest, she noticed that whispers followed her, glances darting back and forth between her and the man walking confidently at her side. Daniel's calm, reassuring smile made her feel untouchable, but she also sensed the subtle changes in the room, the way Mark shifted uncomfortably when others approached Emily with congratulations, the slight pause when people mentioned her successes, and the soft admiration in the eyes of those who remembered her not as the shy girl she once was, but as a woman who had grown into her strength with grace and dignity. Emily approached a small group of friends from her old art club, and as they laughed and exchanged stories of their teenage antics, she felt a wave of nostalgia, a bittersweet reminder of who she had been and the life she had left behind. The conversation was lively, filled with laughter and warm memories, yet Emily could not completely escape the subtle undercurrent of Mark's presence, lurking at the edge of the room as if waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It happened sooner than she expected. He stepped closer, a sly smile playing on his lips, and in a voice just loud enough to catch attention, said, "I always wondered how you managed after everything. I mean, you were always so unpredictable." Emily's smile faltered for only a moment, and Daniel's eyes immediately narrowed in her direction, a quiet but unmistakable shield forming between them. Emily knew she had a choice: she could let him speak and try to wound her, or she could rise above the smallness of his words and show the room that she had nothing to fear. Taking a deep breath, she turned fully toward him, her posture tall, her voice steady and clear. "Mark, I hope you are doing well. Life has been kind to me, and I am happy. That is all that matters." The subtle finality in her tone made several people nearby nod silently, understanding that Emily's words were not just polite, they were powerful, a clear statement of independence and self-respect. Mark's expression flickered with annoyance and surprise, and for a moment, he faltered, as if realizing that the woman he had once known as submissive and unsure was now untouchable in her confidence. Daniel reached for Emily's hand again, squeezing it gently, and the simple gesture seemed to send a ripple of reassurance through the crowd, a visible reminder that she was no longer alone to face her past. As the night went on, Emily allowed herself to relax just a little, engaging with old friends and sharing stories of her travels, her career successes, and the life she had built with Daniel, all while keeping a careful awareness of Mark's movements. He tried a few more comments, half-hidden insults veiled as jokes, but each time, Emily responded with a calm smile or a polite word, never allowing the bitterness to reach her heart. She could see the frustration growing on his face, the sense that he had no control anymore, and a quiet satisfaction warmed her from within. Around them, the reunion continued in full energy. Tables of snacks were being replenished, a few alumni had begun to dance in the small cleared space in the center of the gym, and soft music played from the old sound system, creating an atmosphere that was cheerful, if a little chaotic. Emily watched children of some of her classmates running around the edges of the room, their laughter innocent and carefree, and she felt a moment of pure joy, thinking of how different life could be from what she had once feared. She realized that Mark's words, though once terrifying in their power to wound, now held no true meaning, and that realization was freeing. Daniel, noticing her gaze lingering on the dancing children, whispered softly, "You have nothing to worry about, Emily. You've grown stronger than anyone can understand unless they have walked in your shoes." Emily turned to him, a genuine smile spreading across her face, and in that moment, the weight of old insecurities lifted further, replaced by a clear sense of security and love that she had never known in her youth. She thought back to the years after high school, the years filled with uncertainty, heartbreak, and hard work, and she could see how each struggle had shaped her into the person she was tonight: confident, independent, and cherished. Meanwhile, Mark tried to regain some of the attention he had lost, moving from group to group, attempting to assert dominance through casual remarks and subtle jabs, Yet everywhere he went, he encountered polite indifference or quiet admiration for Emily, leaving him frustrated and increasingly isolated. Emily noticed the small, uncomfortable moments, the way he stiffened when others complimented her achievements, the way his words fell flat in the presence of Daniel's quiet authority, and the way the room subtly aligned with her rather than him. It was empowering to witness, even from a distance, the way respect naturally followed those who carried themselves with integrity and grace, and Emily felt a growing sense of pride in knowing she had cultivated such a life for herself. At one point, she found herself standing near the gym doors, looking out at the parking lot filled with cars from alumni who had traveled hours to attend, and she thought about how strange it was that a place that once held so many painful memories now felt like a stage for her triumph. Daniel joined her side, offering a supportive smile and brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You look amazing," he said softly. "Not just because of the dress, but because of who you are." Emily felt her heart swell. These words were a balm, a gentle reminder that her worth had never been defined by Mark's opinions, and that love and respect were now constants in her life rather than fleeting or conditional. The evening pressed on, and Emily found herself sharing stories from her travels with friends who were genuinely interested, her laughter ringing freely in the gym, each smile reinforcing her sense of self-worth. She noticed Mark standing by the punch table, attempting one last weak insult under his breath, but it was drowned out by the general noise of the room and the subtle authority Daniel projected simply by being near her. For the first time in years, Emily felt untouchable, not because she sought revenge, but because she had grown stronger, wiser, and fully herself. Around them, the lights reflected softly off the polished floor, casting a gentle glow over the room, and Emily allowed herself to feel a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, the hardships, the heartbreaks, and the ultimate triumphs that had shaped her into the woman who now walked confidently through life without fear or hesitation. She knew the night was far from over, but the moment had already been claimed. Emily Johnson had risen above the whispers of old insecurities, the petty attempts at shame, and the lingering shadows of a past she had once feared would define her. With Daniel by her side, she could face anything, and the quiet but powerful realization filled her with a serene joy that warmed her heart more than any compliment or applause could. She glanced around the room one last time before stepping back into the crowd, noticing friends laughing, couples chatting, and memories being shared freely, and she felt a quiet pride. She had survived, she had grown, and she had loved, and all of it had led to this night, a night of quiet triumph and a life that was hers to cherish, protected by the unwavering love and respect of Daniel, and strengthened by the knowledge that she would never again allow the shadows of the past to dim the light of her present or future. Mark, standing across the room, realized slowly, with a hint of despair in his expression, that Emily was no longer a person who could be defined or diminished by him, and though he tried to maintain a semblance of composure, he could not deny the truth. Emily had found her power, her voice, and her joy, and nothing he said or did could take that away. And as the night carried on, filled with laughter, dancing, and stories, Emily held her head high, her hand resting gently in Daniel's, and she allowed herself to feel something she had longed for all these years, complete peace, the knowledge that she had built a life full of love, respect, and happiness, and the quiet satisfaction that the person she had become was stronger, brighter, and more remarkable than the girl who had once walked timidly through these same doors, unsure of the future and fearful of the past. The night continued to unfold with laughter, music, and the soft hum of conversation filling the Charleston High School gym, but for Emily Johnson, the evening had taken on a rhythm of its own, a delicate balance between joy and the quiet tension that came from knowing Mark Wilson still lingered somewhere in the crowd, waiting for an opportunity to assert himself, though his attempts were now less effective than they had ever been. Emily moved with calm confidence, her hand resting lightly in Daniel Carter's, feeling the warmth and steady reassurance that had become her anchor in every moment since they had met. Friends approached her with genuine curiosity about her life, eager to hear about her travels, her work, and the charitable projects she had dedicated herself to over the past years, and Emily found herself smiling freely, sharing stories that reflected her growth, her independence, and her sense of purpose. Daniel's presence beside her only amplified her confidence, his calm attention and quiet encouragement making her feel untouchable, yet she remained aware of Mark's subtle movements, the way he drifted through the crowd like a shadow, his gaze flicking toward her more than once, full of a mixture of jealousy, regret, and frustration. At one point, Mark gathered his courage and approached her again, this time attempting a different tactic, one of charm mingled with condescension. "Emily," he began, his voice low but audible enough for those nearby, "I have to say, I didn't expect to see you looking so polished. It's impressive, really. Must be all the, high society things you've gotten into." Emily's lips curved into a polite, composed smile, but inside she felt the familiar tension rise briefly before being quelled by the quiet strength she had built over the years. She straightened slightly, keeping her eyes steady on his, and said softly but firmly, "Mark, life has been kind, and I am happy. That is all I need to focus on." The subtle firmness in her voice carried weight, and a few nearby alumni nodded quietly, sensing the power in her restraint and grace. Daniel, noticing the conversation, shifted slightly to close the space between them, his calm presence acting as both shield and silent statement. Emily was no longer alone to face her past. Mark's smile faltered, and he tried again, this time attempting humor, but it fell flat against the quiet assurance Emily now exuded. "I guess some people really do change," he muttered, almost to himself, though loud enough for Emily to hear. "Not all of them for the better, though." Emily felt a flicker of emotion, anger, yes, but also pity. She realized that Mark's bitterness was not truly about her but about the life he had failed to build for himself. She chose not to respond to the jab directly, letting it slide past her, because responding would give it power she no longer allowed anyone to have. Instead, she turned toward Daniel, allowing her genuine smile to return fully, the warmth and love between them radiating outward in a way that drew the attention of everyone around. As the night deepened, Emily found herself in conversation with several former classmates she had not seen in years. They laughed about old memories, reminisced about the mischief and adventures of high school days, and marveled at how much everyone had changed, though Emily noted that while some had grown gracefully, others seemed trapped in the same old patterns. She noticed how effortlessly Daniel interacted with people, his demeanor respectful, attentive, and quietly commanding, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude that he had become such an integral part of her life, offering not only love but also an example of how to carry oneself with dignity in every circumstance. Meanwhile, Mark's frustration grew, and Emily could see the subtle signs: the tightness of his jaw, the way his hand fidgeted slightly as he tried to engage with people who were increasingly distracted by Emily and Daniel. It was almost like watching a storm that had lost its force, the energy still present but harmless against the foundation Emily had built for herself. At one point, Emily stepped aside to refill her glass from a table of drinks, and Mark, seizing what he thought was an opportunity, followed her, attempting to strike up a conversation with a mix of casualness and condescension. "You know," he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear, "I always thought you'd end up struggling. I mean, you never really had that drive in high school, did you?" Emily turned slowly, her eyes meeting his with calm determination, her voice measured yet unwavering. "Mark, I chose a life that makes me happy and fulfilled. That is what matters, not someone else's opinion or past assumptions. She took a step closer to Daniel, who gave her a small, reassuring squeeze of the hand, a subtle signal that she was completely supported. Mark's eyes flicked toward Daniel briefly, a flash of unease passing over his features, but he forced a smile, attempting one last feeble jab. "Well, I guess some people really do find their luck," he said, though the words carried none of the sting he had intended. Emily's friends, standing nearby, exchanged knowing glances, silently acknowledging the triumph in her calmness and dignity, and even a few older classmates whispered compliments about how radiant and composed she appeared. As the music shifted to a slower song, couples began moving toward the center of the gym to dance, and Emily felt Daniel's hand gently guide her toward the space, their movements in harmony with the rhythm, each step a subtle celebration of the life they now shared. In the midst of the soft lighting, laughter, and music, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. She realized that the shadows of her past, the whispers of insecurity, and the petty attempts to shame her were all powerless against the life she had created and the love she now held. She felt a sense of pride not from arrogance, but from the quiet knowledge that she had survived, grown, and embraced her worth fully, and that her happiness was hers to define, not anyone else's to challenge. Mark watched from the edge of the dance floor, his expressions ranging from frustration to disbelief as he realized that Emily's life had flourished far beyond anything he could have imagined, and that her strength was not born from confrontation, but from resilience, intelligence, and the unwavering love of someone who truly cherished her. Emily glanced around the room, taking in the smiling faces, the dancing couples, and the warm conversations, and she felt a deep connection to her past and present. The high school she had once seen as a place of limitation now felt transformed into a stage for her triumph, a reminder that the person she had become was stronger, wiser, and more radiant than the girl who had once feared judgment and rejection. Daniel leaned close and whispered, "I am so proud of you," and Emily's heart swelled with gratitude and joy. She knew that every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every hardship she had faced had been a stepping stone to this life, and the presence of Daniel, steady, loving, and confident, made her feel complete. The evening continued with laughter, dancing, and stories shared across the room, yet Emily felt a quiet serenity in knowing that the only opinion that truly mattered to her now was her own and the love she shared with Daniel. Mark, standing awkwardly near the refreshments, could only watch as the night unfolded, powerless to diminish the light Emily now carried, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, he realized that the woman he had once tried to shame had risen above his judgment, stronger and more graceful than he could ever have imagined. As the reunion drew toward its peak, Emily allowed herself to bask in the glow of the evening, the warmth of old friendships, the music, and most of all, the love and respect that surrounded her in every interaction. She knew that tonight marked more than a simple reunion, it was a testament to resilience, to the quiet power of dignity, and to the life she had fought to create, a life filled with meaning, joy, and unwavering support. In that moment, standing in the center of the gym, hand in hand with Daniel, Emily Johnson felt a clarity and strength she had never known in her youth. She was no longer defined by the opinions of others, no longer bound by past shame, and no longer vulnerable to the petty criticisms of someone who had failed to grow alongside her. The music swelled, and she allowed herself a full, radiant smile, feeling every eye in the room notice the glow that came not from beauty alone, but from triumph, confidence, and the quiet knowledge that she had built a life that was entirely hers to cherish. And as she looked at Daniel, seeing his pride and love reflected in his eyes, she understood something essential. True strength was not about proving others wrong, but about living fully, embracing love, and refusing to let the shadows of the past dictate the light of the present or future. As the night wore on, the Charleston High School gym continued to pulse with energy, filled with laughter, music, and the chatter of alumni reconnecting after years apart. Yet for Emily Johnson, the evening had become a quiet battle of patience, dignity, and subtle triumph, a test of how far she had come since her high school days and how resilient she had become. Mark Wilson had grown increasingly restless, lingering at the edges of conversations, attempting to interject clever remarks or faintly sarcastic jokes, but each time, Emily responded with the calm confidence and poised composure that now defined her presence. She moved gracefully through the crowd, her hand in Daniel Carter's, the warmth and reassurance from him giving her a steady sense of security as well as silent support, while her own radiant confidence acted as a shield that rendered Mark's petty attempts to intimidate or belittle her powerless. Emily engaged with old friends, exchanging memories of high school pranks, shared experiences, and youthful dreams, each story eliciting laughter and sometimes reflective sighs, and she realized with satisfaction that she could now recount the past without fear or embarrassment, transforming memories that had once caused anxiety into moments of joy and connection. The soft glow of the overhead lights reflected on polished floors as couples began to dance, children from alumni families ran along the edges of the gym, and the gentle hum of conversation created a warm, vibrant backdrop, yet Emily remained acutely aware of Mark's presence, a lingering shadow whose energy seemed increasingly frustrated in the face of her serenity and happiness. At one point, Mark, clearly struggling with the realization that he no longer held any control or influence, approached Emily again, trying a different tactic. He leaned casually against a table, offering what he hoped was a friendly smile, and remarked, "Emily, you've certainly done well for yourself. I mean, it's impressive how far you've come since we were together." Emily's lips curved into a polite, serene smile, her voice steady and measured as she replied, "Mark, I have chosen a life that brings me happiness, purpose, and love. That is the measure of success for me." Daniel, sensing the shift in tone, subtly positioned himself closer to Emily, his quiet strength a visible reminder that she was fully supported, that any attempt to belittle or intimidate her was futile. Mark hesitated for a moment, clearly aware that his words had lost their impact, but he attempted one final jab, a faint hint of sarcasm slipping into his voice. "I guess some people are just lucky," he muttered, but there was no bite in the remark, only the trace of envy that had been building all evening. Emily's smile remained calm and composed, the light in her eyes undimmed by his presence, and she simply nodded, as if acknowledging the truth without giving it any power. Around them, the reunion continued, the music shifting from lively songs to softer, slower tunes, and couples naturally moved toward the center of the gym to dance. Emily felt Daniel's hand gently guide her forward, his touch steady, reassuring, and filled with affection, and as they danced together, moving smoothly in time with the music, she felt a deep sense of triumph, not in the humiliation of Mark, but in the knowledge that she had risen above his judgment, that she was fully in control of her happiness and her life. As the dance continued, she noticed Mark watching from across the floor, his expression fluctuating between disbelief, frustration, and an unmistakable sense of being outmatched, a quiet but undeniable acknowledgement that Emily's life had flourished far beyond his reach. She allowed herself a small, private smile, knowing that this was not the night of revenge, but the night of victory, a demonstration of strength through dignity, calm, and grace. Friends approached Emily and Daniel, engaging in light-hearted conversation, asking about travels, accomplishments, and the life they shared, and Emily realized how natural it now felt to speak confidently about her successes, to share her joy without fear, and to do so alongside a partner who treated her as an equal, a companion, and a source of mutual pride. Mark attempted another approach, moving closer to interject into a conversation, but Emily, noticing his movements, maintained her composure and responded to the group instead, effectively ignoring his presence without any sense of malice, the most powerful response she could give. He hesitated, awkwardly stepping back, as the room seemed to respond not to his attempts, but to Emily's calm authority and the visible partnership she shared with Daniel. The music swelled, and the atmosphere shifted as more alumni joined the center of the gym to dance, children laughed at the edges, and old friendships were rekindled, creating a warm, vibrant energy that highlighted the contrast between Emily's calm confidence and Mark's growing frustration. Emily and Daniel continued to move together, their steps in harmony with the rhythm of the music and the flow of the evening, and Emily felt a profound sense of joy and freedom, a realization that she was no longer defined by anyone else's opinion, past or present. Mark lingered near the refreshments, attempting to observe Emily's movements, but every glance he cast her way reminded him of the life he had failed to build for himself, the love and respect she now commanded, and the quiet authority she held simply by being fully herself. Emily noticed a few other former classmates whispering, pointing subtly in her direction, their expressions reflecting admiration, surprise, or quiet delight at the grace and confidence she now carried, and she felt a quiet thrill, not from vanity, but from the realization that the life she had built was visible, undeniable, and respected by others. Daniel leaned close to her as the music shifted again, whispering soft words of admiration and pride, and Emily felt a wave of gratitude and love wash over her, reinforcing the quiet power of their partnership and the depth of support that surrounded her. The night continued, the room alive with energy, laughter, and shared memories, and Emily felt increasingly free to be herself, to enjoy the reunion fully, and to reflect on the journey that had brought her here from the uncertain girl she once was, to the strong, confident woman standing in the center of her high school's gym, fully aware of her worth and fully embraced by love. As the evening drew toward its peak, a few more alumni approached to share kind words and congratulations, and Emily responded with warmth and humility, acknowledging their gestures while silently celebrating the fact that she had created a life that others now admired and respected. Mark, watching from a distance, could do nothing but note the transformations. He could not alter the radiance of Emily's confidence, the steady love reflected in Daniel's presence, and the undeniable respect she commanded from everyone she interacted with. He tried one last time, moving closer to say something under his breath, but Emily, sensing his approach, simply smiled politely and turned her attention to Daniel and the group around her, effectively removing any power from his words before they could even reach her. The realization hit him fully then, a slow understanding that Emily Johnson was no longer the person he could control or judge, that the life she had built was beyond his reach, and that her happiness and confidence were untouchable. Emily, feeling the culmination of years of growth, struggle, and triumph, let herself savor the moment fully. She had risen above past fears, overcome the sting of judgment, and embraced a life filled with love, respect, and joy, and standing in the gym, surrounded by music, laughter, and the warm glow of lights reflecting on polished floors, she felt a clarity and serenity that marked her true transformation. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his eyes shining with pride and love, and Emily knew that their journey together was not just a story of personal success, but of mutual respect, unwavering support, and the quiet but undeniable triumph of living authentically, fully, and with integrity. The night pressed on, each moment reinforcing Emily's realization that true power lay not in retaliation or anger, but in resilience, dignity, and the life she had chosen for herself, and she held her head high, smiling freely, moving with ease, and feeling the full measure of confidence that had been forged from years of perseverance and self-belief. The reunion had transformed from a simple gathering into a celebration of her journey, a living proof that happiness, love, and respect were earned not through confrontation, but through strength, authenticity, and the courage to embrace one's own worth. And as Emily danced with Daniel, laughed with friends, and felt the room around her pulse with joy, she knew with absolute certainty that the shadows of her past had no power over her anymore, and that she had claimed her life fully, beautifully, and without apology, a truth that even Mark Wilson could no longer challenge or diminish. The Charleston High School reunion was nearing its final hours, yet the gym still hummed with laughter, soft music, and the gentle murmur of friends reconnecting, sharing memories, and celebrating life's journey. But for Emily Johnson, the night had become much more than a reunion. It had become a moment of quiet victory, a culmination of years of growth, resilience, and the unwavering love she now shared with Daniel Carter. As she moved through the crowd, hand in hand with Daniel, she felt a radiant sense of confidence and freedom, each step reinforcing the knowledge that she was no longer defined by anyone's judgment or past mistakes. Emily noticed the glances of admiration from classmates who remembered the shy, uncertain girl she had once been, and she realized with quiet pride how far she had come stronger, wiser, and fully herself. Mark Wilson lingered near the refreshments, his earlier attempts to intimidate or mock having fallen flat against Emily's calm, composed demeanor, and the quiet authority Daniel projected simply by being near her only amplified the realization that Emily was untouchable to him now. Mark's frustration was almost tangible. He shifted awkwardly, muttering half-hearted comments under his breath, but they held no weight, and Emily's serene smile never wavered, her laughter blending naturally with the soft music and joyous atmosphere around her. She moved toward a group of old friends who were reminiscing about high school adventures, sharing stories that made everyone laugh and occasionally sigh in nostalgia, and Emily felt a deep sense of belonging, a joy in the shared human experience that she had once feared might be denied to her forever. Daniel, attentive and supportive as always, stayed close, occasionally whispering soft words of encouragement or admiration, his quiet presence a constant reminder that Emily had a partner who truly valued and respected her. The dance floor had become more lively as couples swayed to the rhythm of the music, children ran safely along the edges of the gym, and Emily felt the warmth of the evening envelope her in a way that symbolized the life she had carefully and proudly built. Mark, realizing that every attempt he made to draw attention to himself or diminish Emily had failed, finally took a step back, watching helplessly as the night unfolded around the woman he had once tried to shame. He could see clearly that she had grown far beyond the reach of his narrow judgments, that her confidence, grace, and happiness were visible in every movement, every smile, and every interaction. Emily, noticing him for a brief moment, offered only a polite nod, a subtle acknowledgement that no ill will remained, and then turned back to Daniel and their friends, radiating the calm satisfaction of someone who had survived hardship, embraced growth, and chosen love and joy over bitterness or revenge. The music shifted again, this time to a slower, more reflective tune, and couples naturally gravitated toward the dance floor, creating an atmosphere of connection, warmth, and shared memories. Emily allowed herself to be guided by Daniel into the center of the floor, moving with ease and elegance, feeling the rhythm as if it mirrored the steady flow of her life, now controlled, balanced, and full of meaning. She realized that the reunion, once a source of anxiety and a reminder of old insecurities, had transformed into a celebration of her personal journey, her achievements, and the love she now held, a love that not only protected her from the shadows of the past but also empowered her to fully embrace her future. Mark attempted one last weak remark, muttering something about luck or circumstances, but his words fell harmlessly into the surrounding noise, drowned out by laughter, music, and the quiet yet undeniable force of Emily's presence. She did not flinch, she did not respond with anger or sarcasm. Instead, she continued to engage fully with the people around her, to dance, to laugh, and to shine in a way that left no space for his negativity. Around them, the atmosphere was filled with warmth, friendship, and the vibrant hum of life, and Emily felt a profound sense of contentment, knowing that she had reclaimed every moment of her worth, every ounce of her confidence, and every aspect of her happiness. Daniel, his eyes filled with pride and love, leaned close to her as the music swelled, whispering, "You've grown into someone extraordinary," and Emily felt a rush of gratitude, not just for the words but for the shared journey that had led them here, a journey marked by resilience, understanding, and unwavering support. The room continued to pulse with life, with former classmates sharing stories, exchanging gentle laughter, and celebrating the passage of time, and Emily moved through the crowd with a calm grace that drew admiration without arrogance, proof that she had built her life on strength, integrity, and genuine joy. Mark's attempts at attention had grown weaker, and he finally realized fully that the woman he had once thought of as vulnerable was now beyond his reach, strong, radiant, and loved deeply by someone who cherished every part of her. Emily felt no malice, only quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing she had survived her past, transformed it into wisdom, and embraced a life filled with love, respect, and happiness. As the night wore on, more alumni joined the dance floor, and Emily allowed herself to dance freely with Daniel, feeling the rhythm of the music echo the rhythm of her own life, controlled, joyful, and full of harmony. Friends cheered softly, clapping in rhythm with the song, and Emily laughed freely, the sound bright, clear, and unburdened, a reflection of the inner peace she had cultivated. She realized that the reunion was more than just an event, it was a living testament to resilience, a demonstration that one could rise above past humiliation, embrace love, and command respect through strength and integrity rather than confrontation or bitterness. Mark stood in the background, watching, his face a mixture of disbelief and reluctant acknowledgement, and for the first time, he seemed to truly see Emily not as someone to mock or shame, but as a woman whose life he could never touch, whose happiness was entirely independent of his opinions or actions. Emily, noticing the subtle shift in his demeanor, offered a final, composed smile, a gesture of closure and grace, and then turned fully back to Daniel and the group around her, the joy of the moment radiating outward and enveloping the room in warmth. The music played on, and Emily felt a deep sense of connection to everyone around her, to the shared history and present celebration, and most of all to the life she had built with Daniel, a life filled with love, mutual respect, and unwavering support. She reflected quietly on her journey, from the uncertain, timid girl she had once been to the confident, radiant woman standing in the center of her high school gym, fully aware of her worth, fully embraced by love, and fully at peace with her past. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his eyes reflecting pride and affection, and Emily felt a sense of profound gratitude, knowing that the triumph of the evening was not just about standing tall before Mark or her classmates, but about claiming her life, her happiness, and her love completely and unapologetically. The evening drew to a close, and as Emily and Daniel stepped toward the doors, ready to leave the gym and return to the life they had built together, she glanced around one last time, taking in the smiling faces, the laughter, and the soft glow of the lights reflecting on polished floors, and she felt a quiet but powerful joy. She had reclaimed herself fully, risen above the shadows of judgment, and embraced a life of love, success, and peace, and Mark, watching helplessly, could do nothing but acknowledge in silence the transformation that had taken place, the undeniable proof that Emily Johnson was no longer the person he had known, no longer vulnerable to the weight of past shame, and now living a life that was entirely hers to cherish. And as they stepped out into the warm night air, the sounds of the reunion fading behind them, Emily took a deep breath, feeling the steady strength of Daniel's hand in hers, and knew with absolute certainty that her happiness, confidence, and love were untouchable, that she had triumphed not through confrontation, but through resilience, dignity, and the unwavering belief in her own worth, and in that moment, she allowed herself to fully embrace the life she had earned, a life of joy, freedom, and endless possibility, leaving the shadows of the past far behind and stepping boldly into the future with the man she loved and the strength she had always carried within herself.